Barakatuhu and welcome back. You're watching Women's AM with myself, Hasana, and on the panel joining me today we have Sister Zainab, Sister Ayan, and our special guest for today is Adeola Olayton. Well, before the break we were discussing cervical cancer. Let's go back to the sisters to continue that discussion, inshallah. So Adeola, I'd like to come to you now. We were talking a little bit about the screening process, and you mentioned the smear test. So how does the screening and diagnosis process work?
So screening relies on the fact that before a woman develops cervical cancer, there are changes on the cervix which are not cancer and cause no symptoms, and if they were not detected and treated, would lead to cancer. And the reason why you have to go for screening is because you have no symptoms, so you don't know you have those changes.
Sure.
And the screening test in this country starts from the age of 25, and every 3 years until the age of 50. Every 5 years subsequently until you're discharged from the screening process.
I mean, Sister Ayan, let's come to you because, you know, with regards to this smear test, a lot of sisters out there feel uncomfortable at the idea of having, you know, it's quite intrusive and maybe a little bit painful. What kind of advice would you give to sisters out there about this?
Well, Islam teaches us that our body is a trust, so we have to do whatever we can to fulfill that trust, and that comes down to making sure that we're healthy. So, and also that prevention is better than cure. Islam teaches us that prevention is better than cure, and that for every disease there is a cure except death. So it's imperative for us to take measures in order to prevent anything, any sort of diseases happening, and obviously that prevention is within our hands, so we should be doing everything that we can. So when it comes to, you know, things being uncomfortable or painful, you know, it's for a short time. It's not going to be a long process, you know, so it's just about thinking about the long-term benefits of having the screening done, and knowing that, you know, if it all turns well, then alhamdulillah, everything's fine and you can forget about it for the next few years. So it's important to remember that in order to fulfill our trust from Allah, we need to take these steps in order to make sure that we're fulfilling it. So don't be afraid to go for the smear test.
I think there's lots of things that a sister can do to feel more comfortable. You know, there's a lot of information out there, so it might be a good idea to kind of look up what the process is about and try and, you know, make yourself aware of the kind of things that will be happening, or even speaking to your GP about it and just getting some more information. I mean, Adeola, have you come across women who are very, you know, uncomfortable about taking the smear test? And what are some of the things that they've come up with regards to that?
No, indeed, most people are scared that it will be painful, but actually it's not a painful test. And I think the most important thing is to go, as you say, prepared, look up the information. And another good site of information, you know, you mentioned the Cancer Research UK, is the Eve Appeal website.
Sure.
And that tells you quite a lot about what to expect. And sometimes taking a friend along can help you to be relaxed. If you explain to the nurse or the doctor who's going to take the smear that you're nervous, they can give you tips to help you relax. And I mean, it only takes about a minute. So
when you put it like that, just a minute, then it doesn't seem too bad. I think sometimes we do tend to kind of build ourselves up into this hype or this frenzy of oh, it's going to be so painful. But the reality is it is just a minute. And as Sister Ayan said, you know, there are kind of long-term benefits that we need to be looking at. I mean, Sister Zainab, let's come to you, because we mentioned earlier about the HPV virus, but there has been some controversy about this, hasn't there?
There was a little, I think, when the vaccination was initially rolled out. There were some sections of society or the community that were not too comfortable with this idea. Basically, what they believed was that to say that here's a vaccine that will prevent you from getting cancer if you were you know, sexually active. Then that kind of basically gives them the green light to go and behave how they want and to be promiscuous. Firstly, this is completely ridiculous. What young person do we know who actually thinks, oh, okay, I'm going to do this because, I'm going to go ahead with this because, oh, there's no, you know, worries on, you know, there's no repercussions on that account. We know, you know, many examples, and I was mentioning it earlier on about in the news, article 1 in 3. Young people have tested a white substance in their time. You know, this issue of risk doesn't really associate with seeking, you know, your pleasures and going out there and, you know, experimenting. So it's not really the same thing. So to think that it would hold them back is ridiculous. You know, cancer is something that needs to be taken very, very seriously. And another thing is not only so-called promiscuous people are affected by sexual health problems. This is something that you can carry with you for very many years in your life, and to to affect these other people as well is just completely irresponsible. You know, if we're worried about, you know, the choices that our young people are making, we need to be having discussions with them and making them think about their lives and what their actions are how they're affecting them in this life and in the next life. So it's a completely different thing, not to withhold, you know, vaccination that can technically save their lives.
I mean, Adiola, what's your thoughts on what Zainab is saying? It's quite interesting, isn't it, that amidst all of this controversy, that there has been more discussion, and surely that's a good thing, right?
Well, absolutely, and I think her point is very well made. I mean, the important thing is that the vaccination protects you from the high-risk human papillomavirus. It is important that the vaccination is administered before you ever have sexual activity, before you ever have any intimate contact. But it doesn't mean that you're going to go out and be promiscuous just because you've had it. And an analogy that I can think of is the rubella vaccination. Sure. Rubella vaccination is given to young girls so that when they're pregnant, the baby is protected. It doesn't mean that when they get the rubella vaccination, they're going to go out and get pregnant. It's just catching people when they're in school, when they can be given the vaccination, when there is no risk that they've already, or very little risk that they've already acquired the virus. And I think it's important to get it into perspective. And the long-term protection against cervical cancer is what people should bear in mind.
It is about thinking long-term, isn't it, as opposed to kind of the short-term effects. And I think with a greater kind of understanding and knowledge about this subject, some of that controversy will go away. But, I mean, coming from a slightly different angle here, because there have been some talks about actually vaccinating young boys. I mean, is this something that, you know, is actually happening, and why is this?
Well, there's certain countries that are routinely vaccinating boys at the moment. I believe I'm correct in saying that Australia does. This is because the same high-risk human papillomavirus can cause cancers in men, right, can cause cancers of the throat. It can cause, very rare, but it can cause penile cancers as well. And also protecting the boys protects the girls. So there are lots of benefits. And in this country, there are still considerations being given to doing it because it has to be shown to be cost-effective.
Absolutely. Well, really, really interesting there, isn't it? I'm definitely learning a lot from this. I mean, let's talk a little bit more about the kind of important things that we can take away from the discussion. We're kind of drawing to a close here. But before we do, if there's any women out there who have been diagnosed with cervical cancer, what kind of advice would you give to them?
Well, cervical cancer is treatable. The earlier it's diagnosed, the more treatment choices there are. If you have a very, very early cancer, it can be treated completely without you losing the potential to bear children. If the cancer is a little bit more advanced, then it can still be treated, but normally it will involve a loss of fertility potential. A lot of people are held back by fear, but I think that you shouldn't let that happen. You should, if you think that you have any of the symptoms that are suggestive of cervical cancer, and just to reiterate, bleeding after intimate contact, bleeding when you're not having a period, bleeding after the menopause, or a persistent smelly vaginal discharge, go and talk to your doctor about it. They'll either reassure you and say there's nothing going on, or if you have got cancer, they'll put you on a fast track to treatment, and this could very well save your life.
Sister Zainab, it is important that we have these discussions with our GP, isn't it? And we need to have that kind of understanding and openness with them to kind of speak about these issues.
Absolutely. You know, we really need to see it, whether it's this type of cancer or any other kind of illness, to always to put the fear to the side. It's actually kind of, I feel it's irresponsible to withhold yourself from medical help when we know that this is the thing, that our body is given to us on loan. It's not ours to deal with how we want. That we're asked to look after whatever responsibilities we have in our lives, and our bodies are definitely one of them, as Sister Anne was saying. And so the earlier we go, and like you're saying about, it's a preventative measure. The earlier we catch these various diseases, the more can be done in order to deal with it. And even the impact as well in terms of the progression of an illness is harder to deal with the longer it's left, isn't it? So put that fear aside and just go out there and be proactive. Speak
about it and seek the information that is widely available. I mean, Adiola, is there a link between cervical cancer and potentially infertility? Is that something that you've come across?
Well, I mean, if you have got a cancer of the cervix, then sometimes the treatment might involve a hysterectomy, which is removing the womb. And obviously, if you lose your womb, you lose the potential to have children. Or sometimes it can involve radiotherapy. And radiotherapy can also make you menopausal.
Right.
So, but if it's picked up very early, then you may be able to have a treatment that doesn't involve any of those, and then you can still be fertile and still have children.
I mean, it does come back to that, doesn't it, Sister Ayan, about being proactive in the way that we view our health, and that includes going to the tests when required. And, you know, when those letters come through, sometimes it can seem such a pain having to go book an appointment, potentially take time off work or university. But it is really important that we're kind of going out there and doing these tests where needed.
Don't ignore the letters that come through the post, because I know some people look at it and think, oh gosh, no, and then just put it aside. Yeah. It's nothing to be ashamed or embarrassed of. It's something that's absolutely necessary if you want to maintain a good health. And also, you know, people tend to have, there's some social stigma in certain communities about cancers, and reason why people don't get checked out or don't want to get any treatment is because they think that's going to be reflective of themselves, their lifestyle, and they think that it might impact the way that they're viewed by their community or the way the family is viewed by the community. And the thing is that this is an illness just like any other illness. There's nothing to be ashamed about, there's nothing to be embarrassed of, and in the long run it's affecting you, it's not affecting the wider community. So you need to go and get yourself checked out. Don't worry about what people are going to think.
Absolutely, and I think also, you know, what's important to note is that by perpetuating these ideas that we have, it's actually perpetuating the stigma as well. So if we don't talk about it, that stigma is going to carry on, and the next generation are going to have the same attitude, and that's not something we want to see. So definitely having that open discussion is really, really important. Adeo, let's come to you. We're coming to the end of our discussion, unfortunately. Taken a lot of things away, but what are some of the take-home things that you would say to anyone out there who's kind of listening?
Well, I think most of the points have already been made. Don't ignore your screening letter. Go and get screened. If you have symptoms that are suggestive of cervical cancer, do report them. And keep yourself well informed. And there have been a lot of allusions to where you can get additional information. And if you have any questions or concerns, speak to your GP, speak to your practice nurse.
Absolutely. So really great tips there. And I think being proactive, we mentioned before, that's definitely one to kind of remember. Sister Ayan, what are your final pieces of advice for the sisters out there, inshallah?
Knowledge is power. The more you learn about something, you know, the better you feel about whatever it is that you're learning about, because a lot of times people fear something because they lack that knowledge. So there are many organisations you can go to find out information. There's Joe Cervical Cancer Trust, there's Macmillan, Cancer Help UK, National Cervical Cancer Coalition. There's so many different people that you can find information from. So don't be afraid to find the information, and then having that information, looking into things, gives you a bit of control as well.
And
because
you mentioned Eve appeal before as well.
Yeah, so because control can be an issue for some people, and going out and looking for the information, going to your doctor and speaking to them about it gives you a bit of control back. So you might not be able to control certain aspects, but at least this is within your control. So this is something that's within your realm that you can do.
Absolutely, it is within our own hands, and we need to take kind of control of that and definitely go out there and take the test where necessary. Sister Zainab, your final kind of words of advice, inshallah.
I think it's also important to realise that the effect that we have on our families and our children, that if we're setting a certain mode of behaviour amongst our children, then it will become normalised. So like you're saying about these negative views towards certain types of screening and things like that, this will basically get around that. And even if we are sick, how that will then affect the family around us. So we need the word proactive is the thing to take away from this discussion.
And I think this has come up in a lot of our discussions during Women's Health Week about being proactive in how we view these things, and also not losing hope. You know, if you go for the test, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a diagnosis. It is a test to prevent it rather than to test for the cancer itself. So it's definitely kind of opening our eyes and getting some knowledge about the subject. I've definitely taken away some things from that discussion, so thank you so much. Well, the believing man or woman continues to have affliction in person, property and children, so that they may finally meet Allah free from sin, and that's a hadith. So no matter who illness touches, whether it's ourselves or a loved one, it can be a source of constant worry and struggle. However, with the right tools of a strong bond with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and an effort to stay patient along with medical help, we can begin to have hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ease our way through this troubling time, whilst having hope of obtaining the best in Jannah, inshallah. Well, alhamdulillah, a really great discussion there from the sisters. But what do you think about this issue? Would love to hear from you and your comments. You can email us womensam@islamchannel.tv or via Facebook or Twitter. We're off to another break now.